Hello and welcome to the Greg Project. Last year I had the pleasure of meeting and making friends with a gentleman named Greg Mitchell. We started working together in May, and I shortly realized that Greg and I both share an absolute love of music. Greg is a talented musician and an accomplished guitar player, and very often after a long and sometimes difficult week at work, we would look at each other and remind one another to spend a little time on the weekend and play some music and relax. It became apparent to Greg after a few weeks that there are a number of instruments that I play, and as I tell people, I play them all equally as badly. But I absolutely love learning music and just enjoy the sound of so many instruments, and wanted to learn how to play some of them. Greg hadn't heard of a couple of the instruments I play, such as the melodica, and would often say, "Gosh, I wish I could see that," or "That would be neat." And so the idea of actually filming a little bit of the practice on a number of instruments was born, and soon I realized this was going to be a little bit more difficult than I thought, and quite a project, and so it became the Greg Project. But it's turned out to be a very interesting experience, and as I said, it's very difficult to try and keep in practice if you have a very busy schedule and play more than one instrument. So I am a little rusty on a couple of them, so bear with me. And I actually think this is a fairly interesting little video, so I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much. This instrument is called a melodica. It's a large harmonica made by Hohner that's played by using very small keys laid out very similar to a piano keyboard. This instrument is a hurdy-gurdy. They date back from the 16th century or so. This hurdy-gurdy has 4 strings, although some have 3 and some have 5. The strings are played by spinning a wooden wheel which has rosin on it. This acts just like a bow on a violin and vibrates the strings. The 2 outside strings are called drone strings because they just play a single note. In this case they're tuned to A and G, while the 2 center strings are what you play the melody on, and those happen to be tuned to D. You play the hurdy-gurdy by spinning the wooden wheel and then pressing on these keys which will in turn press at certain points on the two melody strings, giving you the correct note. I started playing violin in the fall of 2004, so I've been playing about a year and a half now, and fairly happy with the progress that I'm making, as violin is a difficult instrument to learn. This is an 18-inch handheld drum that in Ireland is called a bodhrán. It's played with a double-ended drumstick called a tipper, and you'll notice that the center is set off to one side. And the reason for that is American music is set in patterns of even numbers like 2-4, 1-2-3-4, 1-2-3-4, where most Irish music is set in odd number patterns such as 3-5 or 5-7. So by having different lengths on the two ends of the tipper, you can accommodate a offset rhythm. The other thing that's different is you do play the bar on with your hand on the back of the drum skin, and this allows you to vary both the tone of the drum and also how resonant it is, or whether it sounds or more. And you can vary that while you're playing quite a bit. You can actually get a very rapid pattern going with a tipper, and it's actually a lot faster than it looks. So as you watch this next clip as I'm playing along, listen to it. In this case, it's what you hear is what you get.
Expect justice from your court. We'll keep the home fire burning, keep the flame of liberty alive, till the fire burns bright in our hearts tonight, for the long lost prodigals return, ever mindful of the prodigals return.
Months ago, I had decided that I would try my hand at cello, because I've also loved the sound of a cello, and in many ways it's played similarly to a violin. In the 1990s, I was traveling out in Sedona, Arizona, and decided at one point that I wanted to buy a cedar Native American made flute. I enjoy the sound of them, and just have enjoyed spending a little time with it. This is a hammered dulcimer, and they do come in a variety of sizes. This one happens to be 46 string. The hammered dulcimer is actually a Middle Eastern instrument in origin, but has been adopted to Irish music for quite a number of years. I think that if you mention bass guitar, most people automatically think of a 12-bar progression, which is kind of... And you can play that a wide variety of ways. I kind of like to play it a little jazzy. I'll play it pretty much straight through the 12 bars the first time, and then I'll play with it a little bit the second run through, so... technique is sometimes called slap bass, and it makes a metallic click on the strings. Sounds a little sharp if you're playing the bass by itself, but if you're in a band and you're playing certain tunes, it can work out quite nicely. The technique goes... slap bass. Okay. One of the other nice things about bass guitar is that there's a lot of really early rock and roll, particularly, that uses common bass lines. And if you know the pattern, there's a whole bunch of different rock and roll songs you can play with a guitar player, just as long as you're following the right key with a simple pattern like... Believe me, that works with, gosh, a dozen or more early rock and roll songs. Do not attempt to try and cello this at home. This is the Irish button accordion, so as you can imagine it's close to my heart, which is a good thing because it's much less painful than being close to my ear. And as the name implies, rather than the piano-style keys that you'd normally see on a polka-type full-size accordion, it has buttons on the right side. Some of the other differences are that it's tuned to C-sharp D, particularly for Irish music, and that most of the rhythm chording are minors, such as... which, as you can imagine, you don't use while you're playing many of traditional Irish songs. Most of the time, as an accompanying instrument, you just play the actual melody. Now, one reason why I play Molly Malone is because it is one of the songs that you do have the proper chords that you can play along with it if you wish. So. But as I said, most of the time you're playing without the chords, and typically traditional Irish bar music such as Whiskey in the Jar, or perhaps Wild Rover, In about 1999, I had joined the Caledonian Club, and it's basically a Scottish group, although they welcome anyone of Celtic descent, Irish, Scottish, Welsh, people from the Isle of Man. And one of the things that I'd enjoyed there is listening to bagpipes played by several of the members, including one named Chuck Jamerson. And Chuck is an accomplished military piper and also a bagpipe instructor. And about 3 years ago, Chuck began to offer lessons to members of the Caledonian Club, and I decided to actually take lessons and learn how to play the bagpipe. And the last part of the Gregg Project are a pair of original compositions I wrote about 1990 for piano. The first one is actually a study in syncopating certain rhythms, and was really quite an interesting exercise in doing something rhythmically that I normally don't do. The very last piece, the second one on this section, is by far the most complex composition that I've written before or since. And again, this was written for piano, and I think it makes a very nice last piece for the Gregg Project. So I hope that you enjoy these two, and I thank you very much for your time.